Hello and welcome. Today I'm gonna take a little bit of a look at some of my modded consoles. And we're gonna start off with my favorite, the GameCube. Now I'm starting off with the GameCube because it sets sort of the standard of what great modding of a console looks like. And you can do a lot with the GameCube. The modding community has been absolutely crazy over the past couple of years, and it has just moved the GameCube from being sort of a console in a sort of a funny spot to probably one of the best consoles when it comes to modding and what you can do with it. So, first things first. The purple one, this was my original. I purchased it together with my sister back shortly after launch. In fact, the first thing I purchased for my GameCube was Super Smash Bros. Melee when, we were out there delivering newspapers in the bitter cold. So we saved up over a long period of time, and finally, I think 2 weeks or something like that, when we finally got paid after we had Super Smash Bros. Melee, we were finally able to purchase our GameCube. So we actually had Smash Bros. Melee first before the system. And boy, we played it a lot. The first thing played on this console was my sister playing as Bowser doing adventure mode. So, as you can tell, I have a lot of fond memories with this system. But next to it, we have my sort of new-ish spicy orange GameCube. Now, this is Japanese exclusive, so this color was not available outside of Japan. Now, what makes this sort of interesting is because there's a lot of things you can only get for this, and it has been becoming a little bit of a fan favorite. So, for example, Nixie made the Nixie Warrior, and this is an excellent. This is almost a perfect controller. It is wireless for the GameCube, and you can just plug it in as you want to, like this, and just sync it with the button. It also works for the Switch. It also works for your PC. Very versatile controller. Now, the thing is, my original console isn't modded. Looking at it, seems fairly standard, but let's just take a look at my modded GameCube, and you'll see something's missing. In fact, the entire disk drive is gone. Instead, we have a memory card down here, our little SD card. And here, you can pretty much fit the entire GameCube's library of games onto a single SD card and load it from here. You see, there's a program, or the home mod game boot up menu is something called Swiss. And Swiss pretty much let you do whatever you want with your GameCube games. You see, I'm from Europe, and this is why some of our covers look a little different. We had the awesome Resident Evil 4 cover. But the thing about Europe was our GameCube was RGB, which was really cool. And you could even purchase SCART cables and stuff like that. However, none of our games, with maybe exception of EA's Need for Speed Underground, was probably the only GameCube game that had progressive scan in Europe. Other than that, when you booted up a GameCube game, it would say 50 Hz or 60 Hz. Now, back then, that was sort of a novelty, but 60 Hz was not really a thing before the Dreamcast and, the GameCube in terms of consoles. So it was brand new. And in fact, some games on the GameCube didn't even have it, like Luigi's Mansion or the original Pikmin 2 does. So some games didn't even have 60 Hz mode. But this is where Swiss becomes particularly interesting. You see, when you open up Swiss, you have the option to mod your games pretty much however you want it. And it can even restore both progressive scan and 60 Hz mode for your PAL games. In fact, what I've done here is actually backed up my own original GameCube games. You see, you can actually plug in on the serial ports underneath. You can put an additional SD card in here. So, on my old GameCube, I modded it. Well, technically, it's a save state windbreaker, basically, you can modify its save file and then you can force Swiss to open. And by that, you can open Swiss. And putting in your original GameCube games, plug them into the system, you can back them up to the SD card. And then afterwards, put the SD card in my modded system. So I have all my original own games modded and backed up digitally on this console here. And I'm going to show you how it works in just a little while, but let's get through the mods as well, or some of the additional stuff you can do with it. So, as you can see here, I have a rather special memory card here. You see, what this does is let you boot up ROMs. Yes, you can actually load Super Nintendo, Genesis, or even Game Boy Advance titles by having additional memory from a memory card. You can also use the additional SD card that sits underneath. You'll also see that there is the Game Boy player. Now there's an exclusive orange one, which I was so lucky that the one I purchased this from had this included. Otherwise, you have to track the original Spice Orange Game Boy player down, and it can be pretty expensive. Now over here, we have some video options. So first things first, we have the Eon Mark II. And this thing lets you use HDMI. So as you can see, there's an HDMI port out. And if I turn my GameCube around here, you can see that this is a 101 model. Basically, it needs the digital out port. So you just plug this in, and then you can have an HDMI cable on the side, and you can even use a Wii component cable. So you can actually both have something like, if you have a Elgato capture card with the HDMI, capture it like that, and then plug the Wii component cable up on your television, as you please. So it actually has a video splitter built in. You can also actually convert this jack into optical out. I didn't know you can do that, but I've lost my little optical thingamabob here, but you can actually get a Toslink optical cable running out of this as well. And this is fine and dandy for recording stuff. This is what I use, but I also have the original component cables. Now this was actually sort of luck in unlock. I'm not sure what the English word is here. You see, when I learned the GameCube could do progressive scan, that is 480p, I didn't know that was locked out of the European system. So getting these component cables was sort of difficult for the GameCube. But when the Wii launched, I got the component cables for it, and I was excited to play my GameCube games on the Wii in progressive scan. But then I learned the truth that, well, European games don't do progressive scan. But that I didn't learn at that time, so I figured, oh, okay, this has to be done on the GameCube, right? Because I've read online you can do progressive scan with component cables. So I ended up purchasing the GameCube's component cable for a whopping $40. Yep, they were $40 at the launch of the Wii, because no one figured, hey, what's the point of the GameCube's component cables when you got the Wii and it was backwards compatible? Nowadays, these cables go for $200 to $250, so I was pretty fortunate. However, back then, I thought I wasted my money. I figured, well, it still doesn't work. I still can't go progressive scan even with the official GameCube component cable. So I put it aside and pretty much didn't use it for a long while until, I finally got into modding and got nostalgic for the GameCube. The thing is, the component cable is actually better than the Eon Flux or the Eon Mark II here. You see, this caps out at 480p. Makes sense, that's the limit of GameCube games. But the component cable actually maxes out at 1080i. Now, why does that matter, you might ask? I mean, it's not like the games run in 1080i, it's just the output, the so to speak window you look through. And that's true. However, This also, well, let me first explain. I have a 1080p, the pretty much legendary Panasonic VT60, last plasma made by Panasonic and the Pioneer Cruelty. It is an amazing plasma screen. It is super fast. It makes 60 frames per second look like 240 frames. And that's not something I'm just making up. There's a science behind it. It is awesome for games that doesn't run more than 60 frames. However, it's capped at 1080p. So, well, this cable goes up to 1080p. The cool thing is, if you run the games through the component cables, this will actually make it so that the games run at an integer scale. That means there is going to be a little bit of a border. However, there's no upscaling artifacts. There's no haloing effect or anything like that. The game are pixel mapped to the screen and it looks amazing. So even though I actually don't have a scaler, I've been thinking of getting like a RetroTink or something like that. However, running your games in 1080i via the official component cables just looks so great that really, I don't even know if I'm really gonna need it. Now I'm just gonna take a look at Swiss here in a moment, so hold on to your butts and I'll show you what the GameCube can do. Okay, so let's try and see what happens when I press the start button on my GameCube. Yeah, sadly it has to stand down here right now. I'm still working on getting the best setup I can, but unfortunately my GameCube is down here. So let's press the start button and see what happens. Oh, well, what do you know? We are straight into Swiss. So let me just move around here. Yes, got a big bright lamp in here right now. Well, you know what? I'll just turn it off. Sorry. There we go. So, what happened? Well, first things first, let's just connect our controller here. There we go. Now it's hooked up. So, as you can see, I'm in something called Swiss. And what this does is I can control a whole bunch of things. So in the main menu here, you can actually see the GC loader. That's the SD card slot that's in the GameCube. And well, I have some options. You can enter the SD card. There's even, you know, the DVD, the memory cards. If you have some internet stuff, you can use that as well. Well, let's just go into GC loader. Here you can see there's emulators, ROMs, whole bunch of stuff here. And then there's also something called the Game Boy interface, which is basically an upgraded version of the Game Boy player. Now, if I go to GameCube, and let's just say, well, let's just play, Super Mario Sunshine. Sure, why? No, you know what? Let's play Twilight Princess. So, press the button here, and here you can see European version. This is a backup of my Twilight Princess game. Gonna press the button, and now I have a few options. Pressing settings, and you can see 1080i, 60 frames per second. And you can dabble with a whole bunch of things. These are actually the settings I'd recommend. The only exception is anisotropic filtering. Some games will have better textures if you put this on. However, this is something that's in the hardware of the GameCube, but it's not free. So some games can actually lower its frame rate and performance. So I won't always recommend doing so. Otherwise, I would say put the setup here as I'm doing here. This is pretty much the best you can do, unless you want to do 480p, for example. Now here, invert the camera stick. This is pretty cool. A lot of games back then had the x-axis swapped on the camera stick. So that was sort of, something you gotta get used to going back. And if you press Y, you can actually see there are cheats here. Force 16 by 9. You could actually do that in the other options as well. And there's a whole bunch of things you can do, like say no letterbox mode. Why not? You can remove the, that mini-map takes up a lot of space. Hey, let's put that on too. And let's try booting the game up. Well, and as you can see, well, it's, the European version asks for 60 or 50 hertz. But, and oh yeah, I forgot to mention, I have the Monster stereo cables as well. They're really awesome, but they have death grip, so to speak. They're in my amp. I have down here, and I have, my speaker system. I have the not the best setup in the world, but I have surround sound, and it is awesome. But as you can see, there's a slight border on the top and the bottom, and this is because of the 1080i stuff. I'll just take my remote here so you can see. 1080i, 60 hertz, 4:3 aspect ratio. So in order to get pixel perfect, this is pretty much what is needed. Now, I don't know if I can really show it off. You can see the minimap is gone because of the cheat code. But let's just go a little closer here. I don't know if it's easy to see, but you can get a sense of how sharp, like, the buttons and everything are. Like, there's no haloing, there's no, like, ugly upscaling artifacts or anything like that. It just looks incredible, taking into consideration that it's, it's only 480p, right? Oh yeah. So, but yeah, this is pretty cool. There's a nice boss and everything like that. Loading times is also pretty much gone, unless there's like it has like a fixed loading time, for example. But yes, I really enjoy this, especially with this controller. It feels almost like a modern console somehow, because of how sharp everything looks. Visual quality is just out of this world for these old games. Now, there's actually a combination you can press here, but I need to use two hands. But you can actually use that to just exit out of the game. Let's see, can I do this while still focusing on the TV? Maybe. Don't fall down. There you go. One button combination, and there you are. We are back and able to select whatever game we want to. Oh yeah, I talked about Luigi's Mansion. Let's just quickly show it off. There we go, Luigi's Mansion. The European version, the superior version of the game, except it only ran in 50 hertz. But see, now I'm forcing it, 480i, 60 frames per second. And, well, let's start up, see what happens. Oh, 60 hertz. It looks pretty smooth to me. Now, of course, you can see the glare. Hello, it's a dark scene and I have big open windows. Oh, sorry for the flashbang. I didn't know it would come off that harsh on the camera here. But, yep. Well, the game is technically 30 frames per second, but it's not 25 frames per second anymore. And you can just have a look at it right here. The game runs actually surprisingly a lot smoother. And you can do this with Pikmin and Dushin the Giant and who knows what else. Let's see, I'm just gonna try a door because I think that's actually... No, I already opened this. Because that's technically, the door animation is 60 frames per second. Yeah, you can see, ran pretty smooth. I'm gonna be completely surrounded here. So yeah, this was just a small look at my beloved GameCube. In front of me is my favorite games for the system. Not in any particular order, but if you want the order, it would definitely be Metroid Prime is my favorite. Then Resident Evil 4, F-Zero GX. I don't know if it's Melee or Wind Waker and Super Mario Sunshine. Those three are gonna be pretty hard to put in some sort of a list. But yeah, that was a look at my GameCube, and the incredible thing about all of this is everything just works. Like that menu you saw where you can just force whatever resolution and everything. There is the only game I have experienced where it doesn't force it in progressive scan and all of that is Dragon Ball Budokai game or something like that. But it's like 99.9% of all GameCube games. You can force whatever resolution or, force it into 60 frames per second or whatever. It is incredible. The modding scene for the GameCube is out of this world. They're super talented. And the GameCube is just such a pleasure, to work with and mod. It is a little expensive. Like, the GC loader is expensive. The GameCube itself, the Spice Orange one, was somewhat expensive. The component cables are very expensive. Even just the GC loader is kind of expensive, right? So it's expensive with the GameCube. However, it is super easy to work with. It is one of the easiest consoles to mod, and it just works. It's such a pleasure. Well, this would lead me into my second video, where we talk about a different 6th gen console. The PlayStation 2. It's an awesome system, but it's definitely not as easy to play, mod as the GameCube, but you have to look forward for that. But that was it. That was my GameCube. Still my favorite console of all time, and having it modded just makes it even better. So thank you for watching, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Bye!